The cell door slammed shut behind me with a metallic thud that echoed like a final verdict. It smelled of mold, rust, and forgotten women. I stood in the center of the dimly lit cell block, holding a small cloth bundle of my belongings, everything I had left of my former life. My hands didn't shake. They hadn't shaken in years. But the silence that followed that slam, it wasn't ordinary. It was thick, curious, almost hostile. "New meat," someone muttered. Then came the shuffle of slippers, the squeak of steel bunks, the creak of bodies moving as eyes fell on me. The women circled slowly, like wolves scenting something strange in the wind. Some were young, some gray-haired and sunken-eyed. All wore the same faded beige uniforms. One woman pushed forward, muscular, cropped hair, a scar split her left brow, and tattoos wrapped around her knuckles like barbed wire. "Let's see what you brought, Gypsy," she growled, reaching for my bundle. I looked into her eyes and said quietly, "Nothing you'll need, Sandra." She froze, just for a second, just long enough. The others stilled. A murmur swept through the cell. Someone whispered. She knew her name. Sandra narrowed her eyes, suspicious. "How the hell do you know who I am?" Her voice was low, edged with warning. She hadn't expected fearlessness, especially not from someone like me. Small, quiet, unarmed. I placed the bundle on the assigned bunk and smoothed the hem of my long skirt. "I see things," I said simply. "I've seen your hands shake when you dream. I've seen your heart freeze 5 years ago on the back of a stolen motorcycle. And I've seen your son alive." The room inhaled as one. Sandra staggered back. Her fists balled. "Don't mess with me. Don't you dare say his name." "I haven't," I said, "but I could, if you want to know the truth." A woman near the wall crossed herself. Another spit over her left shoulder. The energy shifted. Sandra's gang of two fell back slightly. The grip of dominance cracked. Sandra's face twitched. "He died. They showed me the death report. They cremated him." "They showed you a forgery," I replied. "He's in Tallahassee now, living with a man who told him you abandoned him. You'll find the truth tomorrow." She took a half step toward me, her face pale. Then she sat on the nearest bunk like someone had knocked the wind out of her. "What the hell are you?" "I'm Luna," I said, sitting down. "And I was raised to see what others can't. My grandmother called it a curse. I'm still deciding." The cell was quiet for a long time. No one dared test me after that, at least not for the rest of the night. They watched me from across the room like I was radioactive. And maybe I was. It wasn't the first time I'd broken a silence just by being there. But this place, it was different. Heavier, older. Like the walls themselves remembered everyone who had screamed inside them. I laid down on the thin mattress, hands folded beneath my head. Above me, a single light buzzed faintly, casting a dull glow. It flickered once, twice, then held. And I thought of her, grandmother of Dokia, the one who once told me, "You'll walk into places where souls rot, and if you're not careful, yours will rot too." I didn't sleep. I never slept the first night. Somewhere down the hallway, a woman began to sob. Somewhere else, someone whispered a prayer. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of grief settling in like fog. I whispered to the shadows, "Tomorrow someone will scream." And I was right. By morning, the silence had changed. No one said it, but I could feel it in the way they passed by my bunk without a word, in the glances they thought I didn't catch. There wasn't hostility anymore, only caution and something close to wonder. Sandra didn't speak to me, but she didn't threaten me either. She just watched. From her bunk, from the corner of her eye, from behind that cracked mask of defiance, like she was waiting for me to say more. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I folded my blanket the way grandmother had taught me. 3 times, edges inward, corners tucked. It was a ritual, one of many that kept me grounded when the world tried to tear me apart. Was it real? A whisper came from the bottom bunk across from me. The voice was barely audible, but I caught it. A girl, no older than 20, eyes swollen from nights of crying. What you told Sandra, was it real? I looked at her. Does it matter if you believe me? She hesitated. It does to me. I nodded slowly. Then yes, it was real. Her eyes filled with something that wasn't quite trust, but wasn't fear either. Something in between. Later that day, I found a scrap of bread left near my bunk. No note, just a gesture. In prison, kindness is the rarest currency. That night I sang. Not loud, not for attention, just a whisper of melody passed down for generations. A lullaby in Romani tongue, the same one my grandmother sang when the nightmares wouldn't leave me alone. Sov shivari, sov toot, o devil tuk, brigadel. They didn't understand the words, but they felt them. Even the hardest women, the ones with tattoos of snakes and names inked across broken hearts, went still. I kept singing, not for them, but for the ones they'd lost. Some closed their eyes. Some turned their faces to the wall. I saw tears. Real ones. The kind that burn when they come up from places you haven't touched in years. When the song ended, no one clapped. No one spoke. Sandra's voice broke the silence. You sing like you've buried 100 people. I looked up at her. More than I care to count. She leaned back on her elbows. That's a damn shame. Without sorrow, I said, there's no joy. Same way there's no light without night. She didn't respond, but she didn't argue either. And that was enough. Lights out came fast. The alarm buzzed, and the dull glow overhead flicked off like someone pulling breath from the room. I lay on my back, eyes open, heartbeat steady. I heard someone whisper, "Good night, Luna." It wasn't just a word. It was an opening. The next morning, the guards came for me. "Alvarez, warden wants to see you." Whispers rippled through the cell block. They always did when someone got called upstairs. But with me, there was a different kind of tension in the air. A sense of something coming, heavy and unnameable. Sandra looked at me as I stood. "You're not coming back, are you?" I met her gaze. "Do you want me to?" She looked away. I didn't say that. I gave her a faint smile. "Then maybe I will." And just like that, I walked out, escorted by 2 silent guards through corridors that smelled of bleach and cold steel. My steps didn't falter. I'd been here before, not this prison, but this moment. The moment before something begins, or ends. And I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. They took me up 3 flights of iron stairs that groaned beneath our steps, past locked doors and echoing hallways until we reached a corridor that smelled less like bleach and more like paper and old regrets. A brass plate on a wooden door read, "Warden Andrew Beckett." The guard knocked twice. "Come in." The voice was calm, clipped. Military, I thought. The door opened and I stepped inside. The room was neat, too neat. Thick curtains filtered the light into something gray and sterile. A filing cabinet stood at attention in the corner. Framed certificates lined the wall behind his desk, along with a faded photo of a woman and a child. He sat straight-backed, hands folded, watching me. He didn't say anything at first. I didn't either. His uniform was flawless. Dark blue, pressed to perfection. The only sign of wear was in his eyes. Steel gray, exhausted, and behind them, pain boxed up and hidden with a soldier's discipline. He motioned toward the chair in front of him. "Sit." I did. "You're Luna Alvarez." "I am." He opened a manila folder on the desk. "Pending trial. Fraud, manipulation, spiritual deception. Accused of taking advantage of vulnerable individuals under the pretense of fortune-telling and emotional healing. Multiple complaints across 3 states. He looked up. "Are you a fraud, Ms. Alvarez?" "No," I said softly, "but people are frightened by things they can't explain." He studied me like I was a puzzle he didn't ask to solve. You've caused quite a stir in Block C, particularly with inmate Sandra Knox. I met his gaze. She deserved the truth. You told her her son is alive. Because he is. His fingers tapped once on the folder. And how would you know that? Because I see what others miss, I replied. Because when people carry wounds, they leave traces, and sometimes those traces lead to what's still living. His expression didn't change, but I felt something shift in the air. Let me be clear, he said. This facility runs on order, not mysticism, not folklore. If your presence disrupts that order, I'll have you transferred. Understood? I nodded. I'm not here to create chaos. I'm here because someone needs to be heard. He leaned back slightly. Let me guess. You've seen something about me. I paused, then said, You haven't forgiven yourself in 12 years. The silence thickened. His shoulders tensed. You lost your wife and your daughter, but it's not just grief. It's guilt, because you were the one who told her to take that road. That shortcut. You said you'd meet her after your shift. He sat very still. You stayed in the office too long. One more call, one more file. You told yourself it was important, but you weren't there. His voice, when it came, was low and brittle. Who told you? No one. I saw his knuckles whiten as he gripped the edge of the desk. His eyes didn't move from mine, but they'd turned colder, sharper. You came in here thinking you could manipulate me with personal details, make me believe you're some kind of savior. I don't want to be anyone's savior, I said. I only want a chance to do what I was born to do. And what's that? To see pain and not look away. He looked away first. He stood, walking toward the window, staring out at the yard below. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet. Do you know what it's like to bury both halves of your heart on the same day? I didn't answer, because yes, I did. I haven't spoken about them in over a decade, he murmured. Not to my staff, not to the shrink they assigned me after. I've kept it buried so deep I forgot how much it still hurts, I stood. You haven't forgotten. You've just learned how to stand still while bleeding. He turned to face me. There was something new in his eyes now, no longer suspicion, but recognition. The kind that only exists between two people who've both crawled through fire. After a long silence, he said, There's an empty room down the hall. Small. Used to be an interrogation room. I'll have it cleared. You'll report there twice a week. Supervised. You'll speak to select inmates. Quietly. If you do anything to exploit them, I'll shut it down. No questions. Are we clear? I nodded. Perfectly. He nodded once. You may go. I turned to leave, but at the door I paused. She used to wear a blue dress on her birthday, didn't she? His breath caught. You gave it to her. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The room they gave me used to be a cold chamber for questioning, maybe breaking people down. Gray walls, no windows, one metal table, and two chairs with uneven legs. But I didn't mind. I'd sat in worse places. I'd heard truths in stairwells and hospital bathrooms, in the back of a bus where no one was supposed to listen. Here, at least, I had a door. The first case they brought me was almost insulting. A petty theft. A witness named Lamakin claimed he saw another inmate sneak 2 old TVs from the commissary in the middle of the night. No cameras had caught it, just his word. The investigator, Burton, looked bored, even bringing the file in. I don't know what Beckett thinks you're going to do, but go ahead. Make magic. Lamakin came in jittery, tapping his foot, eyes darting. I said nothing for 5 minutes. Just watched. He couldn't sit still. Kept touching his jacket pocket like he was hiding something or afraid he'd forget it. You were paid, I said. He blinked. What? I leaned forward. You were paid to lie. That's why your hands are shaking. Not from fear. From adrenaline. It's the first time in your life someone handed you that kind of money and told you all you had to do was speak. Burton sat up straighter. Left jacket pocket, I added. There's a slip of paper in there. A note with the name of the man who gave it to you. You're clutching it like it's a guarantee they'll keep their word. Lamakin turned pale. That's crazy, he stammered. She can't know that. Burton stood. Empty your pockets. It took 2 guards to get him to comply. The note was there. Burton stared at it like it might bite him. How the hell? I stood. I didn't make anything appear. I just saw what no one bothered to. Word spread fast. The next week, a girl named Vera was brought in. 18, frail, eyes ringed in shadows. She'd been sitting in silence for weeks, refusing to speak to anyone. Accused of killing her stepfather with a kitchen knife. Everyone assumed it was rage. Another broken girl with a violent streak. She sat across from me like a ghost, hands clenched in her lap, head low. I sat on the floor instead of the chair. I waited. After a while I said, "He hurt you first, didn't he?" She flinched. "I don't need you to tell me everything. Just this. When he came into your room that night, did you already have the knife, or did you grab it when he reached for you?" She started to cry, soft at first, then louder, her entire body shaking with it. Between sobs, she whispered, "I just wanted to scare him. I didn't even aim. He grabbed me and I swung. I didn't mean to." I reached up and took her hand, gently. Her wrists bore old scars. Her eyes held newer ones. "He told you it was your fault, that your mom was gone because of you, that no one would believe you." She nodded through tears. Burton, silent in the corner, finally turned on the recorder. By the end of that interview, Vera had told everything. The years of silence, the hospital visits, the bruises she'd hidden. And in her voice, for the first time, was something resembling freedom. Burton looked at me as he turned off the device. "You're not just lucky, are you?" "No," I said. "I'm paying attention." That night, when I returned to the cell block, Sandra was waiting near my bunk. She didn't speak, just handed me a cup of hot tea she'd bartered for. "You were right," she said, "about the letter." I nodded. "I got it this morning. His handwriting. I'd know it anywhere." "I told you," I replied, taking the cup. "The truth always finds a way through." Sandra stared at me for a long time. "Who are you really?" I sipped the tea. "Someone who listens." She didn't ask more. She didn't have to. It didn't take long before someone noticed I was becoming inconvenient. There's only so much truth you can uncover before it starts to make the wrong people uncomfortable, especially men like Warren Blake, the kind who wore silk ties and diamond cufflinks but dealt in secrets and silence. His name wasn't on any official letterhead, but it lived in the hallways, whispered between closed doors. He was on trial for racketeering, laundering, embezzlement, words that meant little to those who'd already been paid to forget. The case was fragile. One misplaced thread could unravel years of protection, and I was a threat to that thread. I heard his name, first from Warden Beckett, muttered like a warning. "Stay out of Blake's affairs, Luna. He's not like the others. He doesn't threaten. He erases." But it wasn't me he came for first. It was Victor Hayes, Deputy Warden, Beckett's longtime second, a man with gray around his temples and tired eyes that softened when he spoke about his daughter, Masha. She was 12, diagnosed last year with an autoimmune disorder that no insurance would touch. The only treatment available was experimental, expensive, and out of state. Hayes had already mortgaged the house, emptied retirement, sold the family car. It wasn't enough. I saw it before anyone told me. His steps got heavier. He stopped wearing his wedding ring. His coffee sat untouched on the table outside the infirmary. One evening, I saw him standing in the hallway outside my room, staring through the glass like he'd already buried something. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The next day, an anonymous complaint arrived in Warden Beckett's office. It accused me of manipulating inmates, sowing fear, exploiting vulnerable women with psychological games. The language was cold, deliberate. Every sentence designed to plant doubt. to isolate me. Victor delivered it himself. He couldn't look me in the eyes. Later that night, Beckett called me in. He dropped the folder on the table. His jaw was tight. "Do you know where this came from?" "I don't need to," I said. "But you do." His silence was an answer. "Victor has a daughter," I added, "and Warren Blake has more money than he'll ever need. That's all you really need to know." Beckett rubbed his face with both hands. "He was my friend. We've worked side by side for 20 years. Then don't hate him for breaking. Hate the system that gave him no other choice." He looked up. "Is it true what they say about you, Luna? That you see things?" I nodded. "Only what people try hardest to hide." He was quiet for a long time. Then he stood. "Stay away from anything involving Blake." "That's not a request." I didn't answer, because I couldn't. 2 days later, I found Victor Hayes alone in the chapel, sitting in the back pew with his head in his hands. I didn't speak. I just sat beside him. The silence was safer than anything I could say. He broke it first. "She's getting worse," he whispered. "And Blake offered everything. Treatment, flights, a private room. All I had to do was make sure you're removed. Not hurt, just gone." "I know," I said. He turned his face toward me. Red-rimmed eyes. "You're not angry?" "I'm sad," I replied. "For you. For her. For what we all become when the world doesn't give us a way out." He stared at the altar. "Do you think God forgives choices like this?" "I think the God you're talking about already cried for you." He didn't speak again. When I left, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel righteous. I felt cold, because now I knew that Warren Blake had taken notice. And he wouldn't stop with threats. He would come for me next. But I also knew something he didn't. He wasn't the only one who could see in the dark. I never asked for access to the archive. Beckett offered it himself. "It's where cases go to die," he said, "but sometimes you can hear them breathe." It was buried beneath the East Wing, an old filing basement with flickering lights and the scent of rotting paper. I spent hours there, alone with the past, tracing the outlines of forgotten names and lives that never made it past sentencing. I didn't know what I was looking for, until I found it. My hand stopped on a dusty, brittle folder. Case number 127/75. The ink was faded, but the name wasn't. Evdokia Alvarez. My grandmother. I sat down on the cold floor. The first photo was of a crime scene. A body lying in a small, cluttered room. No sign of robbery. Multiple stab wounds. Cause of death: exsanguination due to internal bleeding. There was a single line in the summary. No suspects identified. Case closed due to insufficient evidence. But it wasn't just that. At the bottom of the page, beneath the seal of the state, was a signature. One that made my stomach turn cold. Captain Ivan Beckett. My breath caught. I read it again, and again. It didn't change. The father of the man who now trusted me. The man who gave me this room. The man who looked at me with eyes full of pain, inherited from a silence deeper than either of us had realized. I sat there, unmoving, staring at that name as if it might rewrite itself. It didn't. Later that night, Beckett found me still in the archive, sitting cross-legged on the floor, the file spread before me like a funeral. "You found something," he said. I turned the folder toward him. He scanned the page. His mouth opened, then closed. "My father!" "He was the one who closed the case," I said. "No suspects. No follow-up. It was shelved within a week." He backed away a step, like the file had burned his hands. I had no idea. He never told me, because he was ashamed. Beckett sat heavily on a metal stool near the wall, his hands gripping his knees. I thought he was just tired, bitter, but sometimes when he drank too much, he'd say things about orders he shouldn't have followed, people he couldn't save. Maybe he meant her. I knelt beside him and placed a photograph in his hands, one I kept folded inside the folder. In it, my grandmother stood beside a group of uniformed officers. In the corner, Barely visible was a young man in a military coat with Beckett's chin and his tired eyes. "That's him," he whispered. "Jesus Christ, that's him." "She helped him once," I said. "When he was younger. He came to her in desperation. She saved someone in his family. And then, years later, someone ordered him to bury her truth." Beckett's jaw clenched. "If he knew something, if he was protecting someone, he didn't have a choice," I said gently. "You know how that works better than anyone." He stared at the photo for a long time. Then he looked at me. "What do you want from me, Luna?" "Nothing," I said. "But if this is our story now, yours and mine, we deserve to know how it ends. Not how it was forced to end." He exhaled, deep and hollow. "You want me to reopen this case?" "No," I said. "I want you to open your eyes." For the first time, he looked not at the folder, not at the photo, but at me. And in his expression, I saw something shift. A weight shifting shoulders. A burden reshaping into responsibility. He stood, picking up the file with both hands. "Come with me," he said. "There's someone I need you to meet." I followed him out of the archive and into the next layer of the past neither of us could run from anymore. The meeting room was cold. Not the kind of cold that came from air conditioning, but the kind that seeped out of stone, wood, and secrets. Warden Beckett sat at the head of the table. I stood by the window, arms crossed, trying not to look at the man sitting across from him. Warren Blake. He looked exactly like I expected. Overdressed, overconfident, and underestimating everyone in the room. His smile was thin. His eyes reptilian. "I appreciate your time, Warden," he said, voice silk-wrapped steel. "I know how valuable discretion is to men in your position." Beckett didn't respond. Blake continued, unfazed. "There are a number of complexities surrounding my case. Things best kept out of headlines. Witnesses who may or may not remember clearly. Consultants who may be overstepping." He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. "I've heard," Beckett said dryly. Blake reached into his briefcase, pulled out a sealed envelope, and slid it across the table. "A donation. For the facility. No strings, of course. But I've also spoken with your deputy, Mr. Hayes, and I understand you're under pressure. You don't need more chaos." Beckett glanced at the envelope. Didn't touch it. Blake leaned forward. "We both know how things work. You transfer the gypsy to a quieter place, somewhere with less exposure. It's not personal. It's business. You keep your post. I keep mine." Silence stretched between them. Then Beckett spoke. Slowly, carefully. "You think you can buy my silence with a padded envelope and a smile. I think I can offer you peace." Beckett's hands tightened. "I buried my wife and daughter because of a shortcut I told them to take. I've spent 12 years choking on peace. I don't want it anymore." Blake's eyes narrowed. "You're making this emotional. That's dangerous." "No," Beckett said. "What's dangerous is pretending there's no line left to cross." He stood and slid the envelope back toward Blake. "You just crossed mine." Blake didn't flinch, but something in his expression cooled, like a man mentally flipping to a darker page. "You'll regret this," he said softly. "Maybe," Beckett replied, "but not as much as I'd regret doing nothing." Blake left without another word. I didn't speak until we were alone. "You just handed him a reason to destroy you." Beckett turned to me. "Then let him try. If I've learned anything from you, Luna, it's that fear is what makes cowards of men who are born with courage." There was a moment between us, unspoken, heavy, necessary. I said quietly, "He'll go after Victor next." "I know," Beckett said, "and Victor will have to choose, just like I did." That night, Victor Hayes showed up in my room. He looked older, hollow. "I told him I couldn't do it," he said. I nodded. He offered me everything. Told me I could name any clinic in Europe. Masha would have the best doctors in the world. "What did you say?" Victor swallowed hard. "That I wasn't for sale." He sat on the edge of the bunk, staring at the floor. "Do you Think I doomed her? I sat beside him. I think you showed her what love looks like, even when it hurts. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, almost a whisper, he said, "Thank you." I shook my head. "Don't thank me. Thank the man who refused the envelope." Later, after he left, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the echo of footsteps down the corridor. I knew what was coming. I knew Blake wouldn't walk away quietly. There would be consequences. There always were. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid, because somewhere inside this broken place, a man had chosen truth over silence, and another had chosen integrity over survival. And that meant I wasn't alone anymore. It was past midnight when Beckett knocked on my door. No guards, no clipboard, just him. He looked tired, not in the way a man looks after a long day, but the way someone looks when they finally stopped pretending, like he'd laid down a burden so heavy, even his bones had started to breathe again. "I can't sleep," he said simply. I nodded and stepped aside. We sat across from each other at the small metal table. The overhead light buzzed, casting shadows that danced between us. Beckett placed a folded piece of paper on the table. "It's her handwriting," he said. "Your grandmother. I found this in my father's old desk." My hands trembled as I unfolded it. It was a letter, brief, blotched with age and grief. It spoke of a girl she had sheltered, a powerful man whose son had hurt someone, how she was warned to stay quiet, and how she refused. "She died 3 days after writing this," Beckett said. "I think my father kept it because he couldn't throw her voice away." I traced the loops of her script with my finger, imagining her hunched over the kitchen table, knowing full well what might come next, and writing anyway. "She never wanted revenge," I whispered. "Only truth." Beckett nodded. "Maybe that's why it took me so long to get here. I spent most of my career believing justice was something you measured with rules and chain of command. Turns out it's messier than that." "It's always been messy," I said, "but that doesn't make it meaningless." He looked at me, really looked. "You've changed this place, these women, me." "I didn't set out to," I admitted. "I just didn't know how to keep quiet anymore." There was silence for a long while. Not uncomfortable, just full. Then Beckett asked, "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if she'd lived?" "All the time," I said. "But then I remember, if she hadn't died, I wouldn't have learned how to survive. And if I hadn't survived, I wouldn't be here. Do you believe in fate?" I shook my head. "But I believe in people." He leaned back, exhaling. "My father, he wasn't a good man, but I think he wanted to be." "We all want to be," I said. "That's the part that matters." Beckett stood, slowly, pressing both hands on the table as if anchoring himself. "I'm going to reopen her case," he said. "Officially. It'll bring heat, blowback, maybe worse." "I know. You'll be named, called a fraud, an inmate manipulating a grieving warden. I can take it." He looked at me again, this time not as a prisoner, not even as a witness, but as an equal. "We owe them," he said. "Not just our dead, but the living, too." And I realized in that moment it was no longer about my grandmother or his father. It was about what we left behind when we chose silence, and what we reclaimed when we chose to speak. Beckett turned to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think she'd be proud of you." I smiled, holding the letter to my chest. "Then maybe I've done enough." He left without another word, and I sat there in the dim light, not crying, not trembling, just breathing. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like freedom. The subpoenas arrived on a Tuesday. No warning, no ceremony, just crisp envelopes on the breakfast trays. Mine was marked Federal Inquiry Witness Deposition. Beckett's had a thicker seal. He opened his in silence. "They're moving fast," I said. He nodded. "Faster than I expected, which means they're scared." "Of Blake?" No, he said, of the cracks in his foundation. By Thursday, reporters were circling, not on the prison grounds, but outside the county courthouse. A few old names had resurfaced, men whose careers were tied to Blake's empire, men who had quietly vanished when scrutiny got too close. And women, too. Women like Eleanor Jensen. She arrived one evening in a battered Buick with a folder clutched to her chest. Former court clerk. Retired early. Rumored to have fled the state years ago. She walked into the warden's office, sat down across from Beckett, and handed him the folder. I was there the day the Alvarez file was pulled, she said. Your father didn't want to close it, but the order came from higher. Higher than the captain? Beckett asked. She nodded. From someone with political ties and deep pockets. Blake's father. I think he did it to protect someone. Beckett opened the folder. Inside were copies, photocopies smudged but legible, of a memo dated 1975. The language was vague, the names redacted, but the implication was clear. Pressure had been applied, and the investigation halted by design. And you kept this all these years? Beckett asked. I couldn't throw it away, she said. She was kind. She used to bring food for the courthouse janitors. She didn't deserve to be erased. Beckett looked at me. I stared at the memo. This proves it was never a cold case. It was a buried one. By Sunday, the Attorney General's office had launched a formal inquiry into Blake's business holdings. Old victims began stepping forward. Anonymous statements flooded the hotline. Someone inside the system had opened a door, and now the flood was coming through, but not without consequence. Monday morning, Beckett was called to a closed-door meeting with the state's Department of Corrections. When he returned, his eyes were storm-dark. They're suspending me, he said. For what? Improper communication with federal investigators. Conflict of interest. Undermining operational neutrality. I laughed, bitter. Neutrality isn't real. It's just a prettier word for looking away. He handed me a key. To the archives. I'm not supposed to give this to anyone. Then why me? Because you're not just anyone, he said, and they're going to try to rewrite everything. We need the truth on our side. I clutched the key. Beckett turned to leave, but paused. You know they'll come for you next. I'm counting on it. That afternoon, I was escorted to the courthouse. No cuffs, just a plain suit and an officer I trusted walking beside me. Inside the grand old chamber, the air was heavy with history. A prosecutor asked questions. A judge leaned forward. Reporters scratched notes like vultures tracing blood in the sand. And I spoke, not with anger, not with fear, but with memory. I told them about Evdokia Alvarez, about the file, the silence, the pressure, the people who chose comfort over truth, and the few who chose otherwise. When I finished, the room was still. Then someone clapped. Just one person. Eleanor Jensen in the back row. And then another. And then it was quiet again. But something had changed. Not outside. Not yet. But inside that room, the silence no longer felt like permission. It felt like reckoning. Dear Abuela, I never knew how to begin this. For years, I imagined what I would say if you were still here. If I could sit across from you, hold your hand, listen to your voice again. But maybe this is better. Maybe some truths are only meant for silence and ink. They reopened your case. That alone feels surreal to write. It's no longer a number buried in a drawer. You have a name again, a voice again, and people, real people in power, are finally listening. The man who helped make it happen, his name is Andrew Beckett. His father signed the order that sealed your truth, but the son opened it again. I think you would have liked him. He's stubborn and guarded, but he listens, really listens. He once told me that he buried his family under the weight of one decision, and now he's trying to dig himself out, not by forgetting, but by making it right. I've learned a lot from him, but mostly I've learned from you. I used to think your story ended in that cold report. A victim, a statistic, But now I see it differently. You weren't just the woman who was silenced. You were the woman who chose not to stay silent, who risked everything to protect someone else. And because of that, I'm still here. Because of that, I get to speak. There are still people who doubt me, people who call me names. Gypsy, con, manipulate. They think that truth only belongs to those born into power. But I've learned something powerful lately, abuela. Truth isn't about who says it. It's about who's willing to carry it, even when it costs them everything. Victor is doing well. He visits often. His daughter, Masha, is responding to treatment. It's not easy, but he says love makes pain bearable. I believe him now. As for Beckett, he's no longer warden. He turned in his badge last week. Said he wanted to build something instead of defend ruins. I don't know what that means yet, but I think he's finally breathing free. And me? I'm writing. Not just letters to the dead, but stories for the living. They're small things, quiet, but I see women reading them in the library, whispering to each other, smiling like someone lit a match in a dark tunnel. It's not justice, maybe, but it's a beginning. I think about you every time I pass the garden. They've let me tend it again. The soil is tired but forgiving, just like memory. The other day, I planted sunflowers. The big kind. The ones that always look for light, even when the sky forgets them. I like to think you'd understand that. This isn't closure, but I don't think that's real. Not for people like us. But it is peace. And peace is loud in its own way. Thank you for surviving long enough to leave behind your truth. Thank you for teaching me how to hold it, even when my hands were shaking. With all the love I never got to say, Luna.